lovers of the liminal and the weird, and welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. Today I'm going to talk a little bit more about Philip K. Dick's Time Out of Joint. And this time I'm going to go into a plot-spoiling deep read because there's a lot to be said about this novel. While it is deceptively simple for a Dick novel, it still includes a really kind of wild philosophical point being made, I think. In fact, the simplicity of this allows for the complexity to more easily reveal itself without being so abstract and weird that it's hard to pin down, which I think can happen in a lot of the later Dick novels, which I love. I wouldn't put this above a lot of those early or those later Dick novels, but there is something wonderful to be said about how streamlined and well presented the concepts in the story are, because he only really focuses on one analogy, and that analogy is easy to trace throughout the entire story. So in many ways this is easier to talk about than a lot of other Philip K. Dick novels, and it may not bring the same level of excitement that Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep or Palmer Eldritch or Ubik does, but it's still, for me, way up there with those three. So like I said, there's going to be a lot of plot spoilers. Let me give the most basic synopsis of this really quick. This is about a guy named Rachel Gum who lives in 1959 America and makes his living off of a newspaper game called Find the Little Green Man, and he always wins and always gets money for it. So that's become his life. And suddenly his world starts unraveling. At one point, he goes to get a drink at a soda stand, and as he's walking up to the soda stand, he has this moment where the world kind of gets fuzzy and fades away. And then when he comes back to, the soda stand is gone, but there's a piece of paper there that says soda stand. And slowly Rachel begins to understand that he is living in a fake world, that he's not seeing the truth of reality. And the novel is all about him breaking out of this fake world to see the world as it actually is. So there's all your kind of spoilers. In the end, he makes it. He makes it out of this fake town and sees the world as it really is. And the world as it really is in this novel it's the late 90s, and there's been a group of humans living on the moon. There's a civil war going on between the moon settlement and the people on Earth. And the moon settlement is constantly bombing the people on Earth, and they can hide on the dark side of the moon, so the Earth people can't really retaliate. So basically, they just run around to the side of the moon that's tidal locked and throw some bombs at Earth and then run back around to the dark side of the moon. Really interesting setup. And Rachel Gum was a fashion designer. He designed hats, and eventually got very, very rich and was very much on the side of Earth people in this battle, but he started to go over to the side of the Martians. He started believing in his brain that the side of the not Martians, the moon people. He starts feeling that the moon people might be right. And what Rachel does that he figured out he can do is he's very good at seeing patterns. And he realizes that he's able to figure out pretty easily, just thinking in patterns, where the moon people are going to strike next. So he's a very important person. But slowly he starts to believe that ethically he may be not on the wrong side, but that there is no right side. The Civil War always sucks. And he is having a problem with what he's doing ethically. And this is the weirdest part of the novel, and the part that's kind of the hardest to understand. But what happens is he slowly goes mad because of the trauma of doing things, fighting in a war that he considers an unethical war. And in order to appease his brain takes him back, starts creating the image that he's not in the future world of the 90s, but actually in the past, in the 50s, and that he's living this perfect, idyllic 50s existence. And once he realizes he's starting to retreat into the past in his brain, he has all the people that work for him create an entire town that agrees with this illusion, which is really, really wild and kind of brilliant. And a lot of people connect this to The Truman Show, that movie with Jim Carrey in it, in the sense that a lot of this really feels like The Truman Show. A large chunk of the novel is him trying to figure out if the world revolves around him, which is an interesting concept because the entire time you thought about this, you'd feel very narcissistic, right? I mean, that is the definition of narcissism, is that you think the world revolves around you. And he literally thinks the world revolves around him throughout most of this novel, and he's right in this case. They've built this whole town, and there's a part where one of the people that watch Rachel is worried, and this is right after the soda stand thing occurs, and he says, I'm really nervous that Rachel might be going sane, which is such a Philip K. Dick thing to say. It's really, really awesome. They're worried about him going sane instead of him going insane. He went insane, and that's how they want it. They don't want him to go sane. So in the end, he finally does go sane. He breaks out of this town. He realizes all the things I've just told you about the fact that he lives in 90s America, and that he is that contest that he was a part of is actually him telling people where they're going to bomb next. And he is kind of confronted by both sides of this civil war. And he's like, man, there is no good side in the Civil War, period. There's no good side. So it ends with him getting on a rocket ship and going to the moon, where we can assume he is going to broker peace and end the Civil War, which is absolutely incredible. It's a message. I like that this book ended with a lot of hope. I thought that was really, really cool. My camera died right in the middle of talking about Time Out of Joint. I watched the end of the last video, but I couldn't figure out exactly what it was I was trying to say, what thought I was on when the camera died. So sorry about that. That thought will forever be incomplete. But I did want to continue on and just finish my thoughts on this novel. And I might have already said this, we'll see. But one of the things that I really love about this novel is the seeming simplicity of it, especially when you consider Dick's other work. Camouflages, I think, a very well-expressed philosophy that I think Philip K. Dick was really obsessed with. And in this book, he brings up Kant, and I don't think I'm saying that right, the German philosopher, and he talks about the concept of wanting to see the thing in itself. And this is a concept that was very popular for a while, but has slowly been kind of disproven. And to be honest, I think I would need about 6 more hours of research into this concept to understand it fully. But from what I understand, I'm just going to get a little bit into this before I dive into what I really think Dick is saying. From what I understand about this from Kant is that an object, when viewed by us, we imbue it with meaning, which takes away the truth of the thing itself. Like, what is it without us to look upon it and decide what it is? if that makes sense. It probably doesn't, because I am hanging on by a thread with how I'm understanding this. Any philosophy majors in my comments, Patrico, I think, might really understand this. Yeah, jump into the comments. But here's what I understood by it, and I actually connected to a different philosopher, and that was the concept of Plato's cave. And this is the philosophical idea that, well, first he gives an analogy that there's a bunch of people that are in a cave, and they are chained in the cave, and they are all facing the back wall of a cave. And there is a fire in between the mouth of the cave and the back wall of the cave. So they're all kind of chained along the cave, forced to look at the back of the cave, and then there's a fire, and they are watching everything that happens in the world. Maybe I've put the fire in the wrong place. It doesn't matter. Anyway, all of the things that happen outside the cave appear on the cave wall as shadows. And the people are there for so long that they, of course, believe that the shadows on the wall are the real world, that those are the real people, and that humans are limited by their perception to seeing the shadows on the walls instead of the world as it really is. And this is a very intriguing concept because built into it is the ability to allow us to create a hierarchy where some of us can say, oh, we've stood up and turned around and are viewing the world for what it really is. And I think Plato kind of built that in there. But I also think that's very dangerous. That makes it a very dangerous philosophy because it is very presumptuous to ever consider that we can see the world so much realer than anybody else. It's a ridiculous concept. But anyway, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I think Philip K. Dick was really interested in this concept of the world around us not being what reality is. And of course, we eventually get this concept in huge media like The Matrix and so on and so forth. But here we can see it in a very deceptively simple way. A lot of people say that The Truman Show was inspired by this novel, and I can kind of see it because that is another novel that is about somebody that realizes that they're not staring at the world correctly. They're not seeing the reality of the world. They are in some kind of fake reality. And we see this coming from Philip K. Dick over and over again. And he uses drugs to talk about it, and he uses a lack of drugs to talk about it. And in this novel, I think we get maybe not the earliest. I haven't read all of Philip K. Dick, but to me, the earliest that I've read version of him discussing this, and it is done with such a simple analogy that it really, really is enjoyable. Those were kind of my final thoughts on this. It is absolutely worth a read. This was so much fun, and it kind of got me back into a science fiction mindset. Whenever I feel myself going off of science fiction, I can always depend on Philip K. Dick to bring me back in, and that is exactly what happened. Really, really wild stuff. Again, like I said, deceptively simple, easy to read, but with a hell of a philosophical wall up. It really is a great time. So yeah, definitely recommend this. If you like Philip K. Dick, read it. If you like just straight science fiction and you've never read any Philip K. Dick and you're thinking to yourself, Philip K. Dick seems a little too wild for me, this is a great starting point. It really is. Because like I said, to me, a lot of this first part of this and most of the novel reads like just fantastic golden age science fiction, and then it starts to warp near the end into more new wave style. Really, really fun. All right, that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.